Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with one I know many of you have probably been anticipating. This is Armored Knights Case Blue Don Ben by Grognard Simulations. All right, this little addendum, my little girl wanted to say hi.
Hi.
Okay, pop out. All right, so I want to throw this here at the beginning of the video. I'm gonna try to keep this quick. But in having time to sit back on it a little bit, and I even waited to upload the review for this video because I wanted to make sure I was 100% on everything. And I'm not. I think it was a little overly hard here, overly critical, but not tremendously overly critical. The game deserves the criticisms that are going to follow. Having said that, I do believe that there are those who will find something that they can like here, but this game, it's a coconut. It's one hell of a damn coconut. It has something at the center that some people will like. Some people like coconut. Everyone doesn't like, I don't like coconut. Just in general, I don't mean in reference to this game, but point being is that there's something there, but you're gonna have to hack through. You're digging at this to try to get to that yummy, creamy center there, the coconut, but you're not being given the right tools to get in there. You're digging at it with a screwdriver or a pocket knife, trying to get in there. And it's not the right tool. Some people are okay with hacking through as hard as they can to get to that center bit, but most people aren't. And I think that's going to be a good analogy of where this game is at the moment. Grand scope, I think the price point is a touch high, but all things considered, I can understand it. The component quality itself across the board is great. Components are perfectly fine. Good counters, good maps, good player aids. All the pieces are fine. It's just what's on those pieces that is the problem. And you're going to see all this as this review goes on. It's way longer than my normal reviews. And even with that, I'm still putting an addendum here at the beginning of it. Ultimately, I'm going to say this. Yes, I'm very critical from this point on. But I do believe that there are those who will find something that they'll like here, especially people who are really into monster games, Eastern Front games, really deep games. If you like something like 1985, just as an example, it's a good comparison, except that 1985, Under an Iron Sky, and the other Sacred Oil and the others, they've had those rough edges rounded off. All right. So imagine the depth and the complexity and the richness of that game here, but all the rough edges are still there. Right. And it's going to take a lot of work to get to it. There are those who are fine with a game that you have to work at it to enjoy it. Someone who would play the Ultimate Admiral Pacific Edition shit. I can't remember, the War in the Pacific by Decision Games, that 10,000 counter game. Someone who would look at that and say, I want to try to play that. Someone who would look at Campaign for North Africa and say, I want to try to play that. And I'm not saying this game is anywhere near that stuff. It's just that you're going to have to work at it to get the game out of this one. It's not going to be intuitive. It's not going to be streamlined. You're going to be fighting the rule book. You're going to be fighting the player aids. You're trying to figure out what all of this means. As time goes on and a lot of this information gets kind of translated and maybe rewritten in a better way online, and some of those online resources become available, ConSim, BGG, other reviewers, myself, putting out some information, helping to explain some of the confusion, it will make getting into the game easier. It's hard. If you just sit down with it with no external help, you're going to fight through it. But that's not to say that there aren't those that will like it. So as the review goes on from here, understand that, yeah, I'm very critical of this one, but it's still stuck back here. It's still knocking around back here of an interest, not like a bad way, like you kind of want to put it back on the table, And for me to have done all the fighting and all the work because I worked at this game for weeks. I worked at this game for weeks before this review went up, digging in it, smacking around, trying to figure all this stuff out. And even still, I'm still not sure on it 100%. Even with all that, part of me still wants to, where do I have the room to set that whole thing up? And I still want to do it. Tells me now that, yeah, there is something good here. I think a little more time though. And you'll see that as the review goes on, that it was released too early. That's the problem we're at now. And if you're fine with that, you willing to work through that, that's a choice you have to make for yourself. But all right, let's get into the review proper and let you guys see how all this plays out. All right. Now, it's taken me a little while to get this one to the table for a multitude of different reasons. And I'll say right off the bat, I really wanted to like this game. And I've had good times with Death Ride. I've had positive experience with it. And I gave the example before that, if like Thin Red Line Games was like the fine connoisseur wine, that this series would be more like, the craft beer experience that's home brewed out of the guy's garage, handcrafted, and you got one guy just slaving away at it. And I still think that example rings true here. And that's going to have some good and it's going to have some bad with it. And I've got to be honest about it. And I like the guy, I like the games, but I need to be honest about the state of the system as it is now. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job properly. So we're going to go down to the table. We're going to take a look at the components and we're going to do some examples of gameplay, let you guys kind of just see how everything works out. And we'll come back up here and we'll do some final thoughts. All right. Here we are down at the table. I have a scenario, the small scenario, set up just as an example to show you guys real quick. Let's go over the components first. Components. Going to have a bunch of maps. Got six full size, the whatever it is, 34 by 22 size maps that we have in war games. I like the maps. I think the maps have a clean look. After discussing with some people, me and Kev batting it about, some of the colors are a little close. I don't think it's that big of a difference. Evidently, some wargamers have colorblind issues, so you might have a few issues with it. But I do like the clean looks of the maps. I think that works really well for it. Obviously, we got the big Dong River running through over here. The smaller little cities, you see they have names here on the maps. Things like roads, major roads, smaller rivers, all represented, again, nice and cleanly here on the map. Besides that, the game does come with a couple of D10s. That's all you're going to need. We have 3 booklets that are going to come with it. One is obviously the rule book. They are all spiral bound, which is appreciated. Rule book is roughly 30 pages, just under when it comes to size. We have a booklet that has our charts on it. I do have to say, you guys can see, there is a clear covering on the front of the rule book. And I can't get it to pull apart. There we go. On all of the booklets. The rule book, the example of play booklet, and the charts booklet all have this to protect the pages. That's nice. That is appreciated. The charts book here, that has your terrain effects chart as well. And this is thicker paper. So this is just regular, paper. This is more like cardstock, which is appreciated as well. So it's kind of like they took all the player aids and just put them in one little spiral bound booklet. You only do get one of these though. And besides that, we also have our examples, pretty much all examples. So this gives examples of units, examples of play as well. So it shows the counters, the admin counters, all that good stuff. There's one thing of counters that I couldn't figure out. And now that I thought about it, I still never figured them out. And it was the precipitation counters. I never found those. And I looked. And here we go. This is our example play, which you can see is quite verbose. It is, it's big. We'll touch on that here a little bit. And it gets into the supply. And here we've got aircraft and how they're going to be kept track of. And then back here at the back, we've got unpacking hedgehogs and things like scenario notes. I thought the first one on there was quite amusing. Scenario cards are very information dense. Read through them carefully or you will miss something important. That is an understatement. All right, so that's not all the components. Those are the booklets. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I touch on next? Because we're going to start getting into the specifics here. But let's do the paper for the setup, okay? So you have a bunch of these. They're double-sized, right? So fold it in half. One side's going to have all of your kind of instructions, special rules, any of that crap on the back. And the other side's going to have a picture of your map and then the basics of where the units go. Okay, so that's what you see here is the tank cemetery setup. This is the Russians, the first tank army making a push, and they run into some German resistance right here. Okay, and there's hedgehogs, there's units, there's armor, there's anti-tank guns headquarters. There's no supply units. I think I might have one or two mixed in there, but I didn't really worry about those because supply isn't tracked in this specific scenario. And even though it's not tracked, the supply counters are shown here. And I'm like, why are you showing the supply counters when they're not being used? It doesn't make sense. I mean, I get the Germans have some special rules. So you see here, combat supply markers, right? That's what those are. And it shows them on the map, even though the very first thing it says is you don't track supply points in this. SP are not tracked in this scenario. So, okay. If they're not tracked, then I don't need to know this because you already said that all the Russian units are considered in combat supply for this scenario. That I don't get. Okay, but let's start getting into the specifics here. Okay, so you see we've got the 60th motors, the 3rd motors for the Germans. They have a couple extra units besides that. The 91st Flak Regiment, you got a couple of those guys. But they've incurred some losses. So over here, it has both of those units and what's included. All right, so you've got like the 103rd Panzer Battalion, all of it, except for 1Y, right? That's what that says right there, -1Y. And I was looking at this for a little bit of time and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, what the hell is he talking about here? And it turns out what he is talking about is listed here. And that is on this book. Let me get that clear page off. And it's talking about unit types that are considered blue, units are red, units are yellow. So it's basically armors, yellow, heavier weapons or engineers are red, and your infantry type stuff is blue. Okay, great. Those are your color codes. Now that I get that, I understand it's meaning -1Y, -1 yellow, -2 blue, -1 red. Okay, but even that doesn't fully explain it because, like, okay, our 160th Panzer Battalion over here, you're saying -1Y for those, but is it any Y? Do I just pick a Y? Because there's different stats on these guys. Like looking at some of them, looking at some of them, you can see like our Panzer unit here. This one's 6'8". It has another informational thing there that has another thing to do with its stats, but basically it's a 6'8" unit, 6 power, 8 movement points. But some like this is 3rd motors, but it doesn't matter anyway, 4'8". 6'8". You're like, okay, well, which one of the yellow do I not include? Do I just pick a yellow and not include it? It doesn't explain that. And the -2 blue, -1 red, that wasn't really well explained either, because I'm like, okay, well, which one? That basically leaves it with one blue unit, but some of these units are kind of blue and red. So like these units, that's got a little red and it's got a little blue. So I just counted that as red and removed it. It's not overly well explained, and some stuff you're just supposed to intuit and know. Okay, I'll try to guess. Same thing over here. When we're talking about our setup, we've got letters: veteran, veteran, green, green, green. But I couldn't find anywhere where it's actually listed down that's what that means. There is a section that talks about veterancy, I think. I know it talks about it in combat, but I actually don't think there's anywhere that talks about actual veterancy of the units, besides the fact that they do have different veterancy levels that will come into play when you are performing a combat action. There's some of this stuff it needs to be spelled out, because these rule books need to be written for someone who's not a wargamer. It needs to be written so if this is someone's first game, they could play it. And if this was someone's first game, they couldn't play it. Another example here while we're looking at our setup. The 28th TC, I'm guessing that's 28th Tank Command. So we got 28 TC here, 28 TC here. And that's because the 39 Tank Battalion is part of the 28 TC, but that one doesn't come in until later. That doesn't come until the 27th. But let's see. Yeah, so this scenario takes place 726 through 727. So it's 2 full day turns, basically, a way to look at it. We start with the morning turn of the 26th and go into the 27th. Well, the 27th is when that 39th group can come into play, but it doesn't say that on here, but that should be said on here because that's when they can come into play. And that gets us into another component, and these are our orders of battle. And there are a bunch of these for the Soviet units and then one for the German units, except this page that's got Soviet units also has some explanations for German units, which should have just been on the back of the German one or on a different page instead of mixing and matching over here. But okay. So like here, actually, no, I read that wrong. That says 726. That can come in on the 26th. So I guess it can come in on that day. I read that wrong. I thought it said 727. Regardless, we've got the 28th Tank Command over here. And those are the units that are part of it. And you can tell because they got the same color bands. If you look at the tops of the counters, they each have different color bands, and that's their formation line. Okay? But all of these others, so the 158th, the 131st, they're all listed down on the counter. So over here, this is like the 131st. These say 131st on them. Okay? And over here, I've got some 158th. They say 158 on them. But when it comes to the 28th Tank Command, I wasn't exactly sure which units I'm putting where, because the only unit that says 28 on it is the HQ. The rest of them have different designations. So like Tank Battalion, Tank Battalion, Tank Battalion, and some motorized reconnaissance, I think, or something, motorized infantry over here. But these are all part of the 28th. But we've got part of it over here. So they're going to be out of command because their HQ's over here. Unless I move their HQ into a range, but I don't think that the HQ can be put in range. Let's see, what's the HQ's range? Now I forgot where I put the damn HQ. There it is. Its range is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I can just barely reach over there and not really far enough. So they'll be out of command anyway. But just to help newer players and newer people, I would have also put on here, all right, so you've got the 28th, but put in like a parentheses or something that's going to be comprised of the 55th, the 56th, and the 32nd, right? They're all going to be over here as well, because I wasn't really sure exactly what that was talking about. And then we've got First Tank Army. So all of this, I'm flipping back and forth through a lot of stuff here. This is all part of the First Tank Army, and it falls under something else. There's another player aid that has different order of battle for this stuff. But it says the First Tank Army has First Tank Army level assets. No artillery brigade HQs, but it does get 2 anti-tank battalions, 2 AA battalions, and 2 engineer battalions. And I couldn't really figure out which ones to grab for that. I ended up guessing what to grab. So I looked up here. This is the top echelon for the First Tank Army. And here we've got some anti-tank. Here we've got some engineers. Here we've got some AA. And I was like, you know what? Good enough. I was like, you know what? Good enough. I'll take 2 of those, 2 of those, 2 of those, and grab them, and we'll just subordinate them out to other units, because you can be subordinated here on the board to other units. There are counters that help you keep track of some of that, but some of it's going to be done on the board, and some of it's going to be done off map for different units. And it depends on the unit on what's going to be done. It's like artillery can be done just on the board, but some others, they're going to have to be done on different player aids, and it gets confusing. So that brings us into other player aids, like this is German one, and this is for different armies, corps, division, brigades, and the supplies, the stockpiles that they have, the supply points that they have over here. But I think you can put counters on this as well to help keep track of who's subordinated to who. At least I think this is the player aid that you're going to use for that. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong on a lot of stuff here. Okay, so that's a player aid. Now, this is just a single setup, and this is a small piece. So keep this in mind right here. Okay, keep this little section in your head. Now, this is set up a little bit different, but this is one of the larger ones where you're going to have a whole lot of units and a bunch of maps. So what we were basically looking at there was this little segment. Okay, so this little piece here, that little piece of the map. And now imagine setting up all of this with that level of confusion. And I think it would get easier if you're setting up all the units, because with everything going onto the board, you really just need to know where their commands are going to be. And it makes it easier to kind of keep track. But there is the subordination thing that's going back and forth. And it's not as clear as it should have been. I use Thin Red Line Games as an example. But one of the things that they did that I really liked is they had a order of battle for all of their scenarios, and each individual unit was listed down like Excel sheet style, and you could read it top to bottom, figure out each individual unit. Its code was there, its numbers, everything you need to know, and then the hex that it went in. So you knew when you were done that you had grabbed the exact right units, and you knew that they were going in the exact right hex. You do not have that luxury here. Now, does everyone need it spelled out to that level? No, but some people do. And I think it probably could have helped this game a little bit when it came to getting the units onto the board, to have it spelt out Barney style. Like, hey, if you want to do your own deployments, you can. And these are the rough areas where you want to go. So do your own thing. Hey, but if you don't want to, here's a spreadsheet that lists down starting zones for all these guys, historically where they were at, so you know what units are going where, and you know you're setting yourself up right. All right, so before we start getting into the sequence of play, talking about how the game's going to play itself, I wanted to touch on another component, and that is these sheets. Okay, so we've got these. There's one for the Germans, one for the Soviets, and this is like your air control, right? This is where you're going to keep track of your planes, their fatigue levels, and all that good stuff, okay? But speaking of fatigue levels, we'll go back to our original sheet here, and this is our setup sheet. This is for our aircraft for this scenario, and it tells us this, and it's like defined below, including their initial fatigue state. Well, this says fatigue 0. And I'm like, okay, does that mean that this is fatigue level 0? And then we count it out from there. So the fatigue 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Or is there something else going on here. Like, this isn't perfectly clear in and of itself. I was able to figure out that this means these are the number of aircraft of each type that you're going to get, and they are at fatigue 0, but I couldn't figure it out by just looking at that sheet. I had to look at a separate setup sheet. So here's that larger one that I was just showing you, and we see here fatigue level 0, 2, and 4, and all the aircraft that are listed down. There's another part, I still haven't figured it out. It might be in the rules somewhere, but I don't know how we start with 0.5 of an aircraft. I don't know. Someone will have to tell me where that comes from. Why would you have 0.5? That just doesn't make sense to me. But okay, fatigue levels, how many aircraft, I get you. And you're going to keep track of it using these sheets. Like I said, one for each side. And if we look closely at our little map here, this shows the map of the area, and it's got like airports listed down here somewhere. But even this isn't really clear on what's going on. So I'm thinking this is the city, maybe? All right, so like Tetskaya, whatever, right here. We see it's right there, okay? But we've got one of those over here, and I thought there was another one, but I could be wrong on that one. But here we go. Morosakaya. So we got 1, 2, and 3. But I'm guessing this is a typo because this is Morovsky, not Skya. But I'm guessing that's what it has to be because the spelling is very close. But this is 1, 2, and 3 airports. So are all of those located there? Is that where they are? I don't know. I'm still unsure what some of these other numbers represent that are on here. And it says this is for their location, right? So airfield, the name of it, its size, and its supply level. So size, location, supply level. We'll touch on supply level here in a sec because that's another thing I mentioned later. But size and location. So size L1, location D4N. Okay. But like here, this one, its size is L1, but its location is C4N. And I'm looking at the map, and the map starts at D. D, E, F. And then, counts out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But there is no C. There is no C on here. So how do you have an airfield that's at location C4? There's a D4, but C4 should be up here. So it's not even on this. And there's another aspect with this where you're supposed to basically count air sectors when you're deploying aircraft. You're not supposed to be counting hexes, except some of the rules do have to do with counting hexes. And I forget the specifics, and you know what, I'm so burnt out, I'm not going to look it up to figure it out. But there's a rule that comes into play that has a modifier if you're 15 or under hexes away, or if you're 15 or more hexes away, one way or the other. But I'm looking at this and it's like, well, how am I supposed to know if I'm 15 or more hexes? I'm not counting hexes. I'm counting air sectors. We don't count hexes for aircraft. We just count air sectors. But in these situations, I'm supposed to count hexes. But where am I counting the hexes from? Where am I starting? Where am I? It's so more complex than it needs to be. This could have been streamlined so much better. And evidently, from what Kev was telling me, that there is a way that you look at this and like you start at a certain hex and you count around. And I can't even remember what the hell he was saying. But evidently there is a system. But from what Kevin told me, that system for how you figure it out and count the hexes around, it's not anywhere. It's not in the rules, and it's not on any of the player aids or charts. I think he posted it to Facebook. So that's just missing. So you can't figure this stuff out. Now, as we're looking at these, the fatigue levels, for the most part, are easy to understand. The F just represents the fatigue, so whether they're available to fly or if they've already flown, and what level of fatigue they're going to have. And you can bounce them around. So they'll start at 0, and then So they'll start at 0, and then just depending on what happens during their flights, if they get intercepted or weather or whatever, they'll pick up 1 or 2 levels of fatigue, maybe 3. If they get 3, they can't fly anymore. That's why it doesn't say available. 3 or 4 both kind of knock them out for that turn, and then they can reduce their fatigue in later turns and come back to be flown again. But this aspect, that's understandable. That works. You just move your counter along depending on what the results were of your combat roll with your aircraft to whatever level of fatigue that you have, and depending on that level, you may be able to fly that aircraft again. Okay, where you're flying it from and what target and how many hexes or air sectors, I don't know. I have no idea. Honestly, if I were to try to play this, I would completely ignore the air sectors and I would just worry about their fatigue levels and not even worry about what airport they're at, because I can't figure it out. Okay, so let's get into the game proper for a little bit. All right, so here we've got our charts booklet. Now let me stop hitting my table here. You've got your daily sequence of play, and there's something that's called SOD interphase. That's what he calls it. It's the start of day interface. And this is where certain things are going to happen. Your weather, your organizational retraining, engineering, certain stuff, supplies, and air operations, like those fatigue levels that I was talking about. And something neat you can do with air operations, you can actually drop in supplies. So if units get pocketed, you can use air missions to drop them supplies to keep them combat effective. Stuff like that's cool, but it's so complex, it's hard to do. But our game turn sequence of play listed here. We're going to have precipitation. There are precipitation chits supposedly in the game. I couldn't find them. I'm probably missing them on the counter sheets. Yeah, brain fart in there. I'm missing them on the counter sheet somewhere. I can't find them, and I did not see them in the booklet that explains all the counters. So I went and looked here just to see, like, okay, am I missing it somewhere? There's got to be a precipitation counter. Let me see what it looks like. And we've got supply, combat supply points, deliberate attack, hasty. Those are for step reductions, out of communication, out of supply, isolation, HQ removed, air resting, returning from missions, aircraft fatigue, route, railhead, destroyed bridge, hard airbase hits, soft airbase hits, subordination, shattered formation, troop quality, lost track markers, dismounted unit markers. No precipitation markers that I could find in here anywhere to use. So they might not be in this game. Maybe they're going to be in a campaign module, but as far as I know, I couldn't find them. Now I'm going to try to speed up this next little bit, but I just want to touch on like the basics of this. Some of this stuff you guys should understand. When it comes to your operation phase, the phase where you're doing stuff, right? Movements, attacks, all that good stuff. You're going to have the German phase, and then you have the Soviet phase, one after another. The only difference here, where it's not a difference, but the only thing is you do all your hasty attacks first, and then you do your deliberate attacks. Think of it, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but hasty attack is quicker, less supported. Deliberate attack, more planning involved about doing that. You can get more of an exploitation, gain more ground that way, get more support, artillery, close air support, all that good stuff. But those two are done in two different phases. You'll have your start of the day stuff once, and then you have a daily sequence of play. So you'll do your 0 to 4 800s, or 04 to 08, 8 to 12, and so on throughout the turn. And daylight comes into play in the later turns when it does get to nighttime. But this is what you're going to do during each one of these. So 04 to 08, you're going to do this. You're only going to do this once, just at the start of a day, but this gets done every time for each one of these. All right, so we're zoomed in here down at the counters themselves. And anyone who's played a NATO symboled counter game before is going to kind of get the gist of what's going on here. You're going to have your infantry divisions, your your panzer groups, AT guns, artillery units, AA units, all that good stuff over here, okay? Now, the first thing that you're going to do is check for out of supply, out of communication, and that's where you're doing the basic thing, tracing that unbroken line to an HQ unit or supply point. For example, here we have a HQ unit, and their ranges are listed there in the center. That gold, that orange block there with the 3 in it. So this one has a 3. I got another HQ unit over here somewhere. Okay. Here's one. This one's the 28th, and it's covering these units over here. His range is a little bigger. He's got a 6. Now, there is a stacking limit per hex, and the thing is, it varies per units. Some of these units are going to be 1 step. Some of these units are going to be 2. Some are going to be 3, and some are going to be 4. Sadly enough, it's not really marked on any of the units. It should have been somewhere. Just for ease of play, decision was made to not do that. The stacking limit is 12 steps per hex. I know I'm under it for all of these. The way I understand it to be is for like Russian infantry units, a full strength one's going to be 3 steps. German ones are going to be 4 steps. And with the rest of the stuff, if it is a double-sided counter with reduced strength, like our panzer units here, or not panzer, but our tank units here, that is going to be a 2-step unit. And a lot of the others are just going to be 1-step units. As you can see, these guys don't have anything on their back, right? There are going to be some reduced strength units that would be higher, but not. They've got a dash next to the top little icon, but I don't see any on the board that I can use as an example right now. Okay, let me pull this up right here. This is what I'm talking about, that little dash there. That means a reduced 2-step half battalion. Soviet tank battalions, are 3, half battalions are 2, heavy weapons are 2, Soviet level AT battalions are 3 steps. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely positive on the steps on some of these units. And I think this could have been solved with some type of, oh yeah, and I see one, I've got a dash here. So this one's a reduced 2-step one. Some of this confusion could have been solved with some dots on here or something, right? Put 2 dots in the bottom left if it's a 2-step, 3 if it's 3, 4 if it's 4, something like that, just to make it easier. Something on the counter that someone could look at to know intuitively whether or not it's 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. It's just not as clear as it should be. I think it will become clear over time as you play the game. But even still, some of this just isn't the clearest. Like our AT unit over here, this is a multi-step unit because it is a higher level. This one is a single step. I do believe it's weaker, it's smaller. This is like a lower echelon level. So these are those tank level army assets. They have more steps available to them. That makes it a little bit easier for you to understand. It's basically looking at the back of the counter. Does it have anything there? But on the sad side of that, I'm trying to find an example. I know I had a couple out here. Now I can't find them. There are some units that are double-sided printed that are still considered 1 step, and it's the other side is an advanced version of it. So think a better gun, improved technology as the war went on. That's the improved side. It will have a dot on the backside designating that it's the improved side. But if it gets wiped out and reconstituted, it comes back to its weaker side. And since I can't find an example to show you guys right here, this is what I'm talking about. So this is a 1-step unit, but both sides are printed. So that little shorthand of, does it have a backside? If it has a backside, it's more than one step. If it doesn't have a backside, it's just one step, isn't always true. Let's start talking about the gameplay itself and the combat, because I want you guys to understand that. And I think you're getting it. I'm coming across very harsh here on this game and a lot of the issues. And I feel kind of bad about that. But like I've said, I think it just needed more time in the oven before it got to this point. There's just too much that is unclear. Now, the next part is really where it starts becoming nitty gritty, because we're talking about the gameplay. So what I'm going to do is this is our example of play. Okay. So this is supposed to help you understand the initial hasty attack. A hasty attack, remember, this is the quick, down and dirty, just throwing some stuff at something to do a quick attack. It's not a deliberate attack. There's a hasty attack. Let me read this to you for just a second, and keep in mind what I'm reading out here, okay? Talking about ground units. The 3 24th Panzer units in Hex A move southwest, and I'll show you the picture. It's over here. You can take a picture if you want, whatever. Even this isn't quite that clear, but regardless. Move in Hex A, move southwest into Hex B, declaring a hasty attack against the suppressed Soviet unit. The action cost, the 21st Soviet Reconnaissance, I guess, Battalion 5 MP, that's movement points, 2 MP for the Hex plus 3 MP for the hasty attack, because you're charged a percentage of your movement points to perform a hasty attack. Okay. At this moment, take out that first "the." At this moment, either the hasty attack must be resolved or more units must be added to the attack. The German player chooses the latter and adds the units in Hex C into the attack. Bear in mind that while these units have not moved, they are considered to have spent the same amount of movement points as the units in Hex B, 5 movement points of 12 movement points. Because when you add other units into the attack, they all have to spend the same, even though they're supposed to be spending a percentage. So basically, whoever spends the most, that's what everyone has to spend. Okay. At this point, he is ready to resolve the attack. Here we go. He decides to commit no leadership, no air, but adds the light artillery unit into the attack. For hasty attacks, only 1 light organic artillery can be committed. The Soviet player chooses to add the 432nd light artillery into the defense. Combat proficiency. Now, the German player resolves combat proficiency. A hasty attack from 2 hexes with elite troops. The net die roll modifiers +3. +4 for elite troops, -1 for a 2 hex hasty attack. He rolls an 8, which is modified to a 12. The result is +1 die roll modifier plus a good blue random combat event, RCE. He rolls 3 for the RCE, Recon Initiative. As he has no recon in the attack, he does not benefit from the RCE. Okay, don't follow me. Combat odds and die roll modifiers. Next, and this is all for one attack. This is all one attack. Next, artillery density modifiers. 3 soft steps in the defender hex means attacking artillery will be halved. 5 soft steps across 2 attacking hexes means the defending artillery will also be halved. The defender's total combat strength is 12 +3 regimental integrity. I don't know what that is. +2 artillery equals 17. The attacker's total combat strength is 12 +12, 2 panzer companies ×2 for clear terrain and no defender AT, +40 +20, the 2 reconnaissance battalions +50% for regimental integrity. I don't know what that means. +6 for self-propelled gun, +3 for AA, +4 for artillery equals 97, -25% hasty attack. 72.75. The net odds are 72.75 divided by 17 equals 4-1. The attacker's die roll modifiers are +5, +1 for 2 tank companies, +1 for light anti-air, +1 for combat proficiency, +2 for defender suppression. The defender's die roll modifiers are +2 for suppression. Combat resolution. The attacker rolls a 6, modified to an 11, which yields a 3R/RT1 -B. The casualty result of 3 is halved to 1.5 as there are 6 or less steps in the defender hex. As the Soviet rounding token is on its plus side, the half casualty rounds up for a total of 2 steps lost by the defender. The Soviet player flips his rounding token to the negative side. The defender rolls a 4 for its route roll, modified by +1 for the RT1 and +2 attacked by armor 2 with no defender AT to a 7, which is greater than its national morale of 6, so it routes. The battalion loses 2 steps, routes to Hex G, and he adds 2 blue step losses to his loss track. In return, the defender rolls a 4, modified to a 6, which is a miss on the defender CRT. As this was a hasty attack, the B exploit code is ignored. The German leaves the 21st Battalion in Hex A and advances the other 5 units into Hex D. Let me see if I can just figure out what charts were used for that hasty attack. So we're on a chart table here. Okay, chart table. No error was committed, so we're not on any of these pages. We did have some routing, so we would have used that. There was no counter battery, but there could have potentially been. Not combat supply, off-map recon for campaign games. We did use this one. So we got one over there. We got this one. This is our terrain effects chart, which gave something. Combat proficiency table. All right, so we rolled here to get ourselves some stuff down here. So after we rolled here, then they had to roll there to get that random combat event. Got recon initiative, +1 die roll, step max plus, or per step max +4. But we didn't have any recon, so nothing to happen there. That we didn't have to use. This we did not have to use. Non-train combat modifiers, we would have used that. We would have checked over here. We would have checked over here. Armor quality ratings, I think this would have come into play. No, this one wouldn't have come into play because this, I think, only comes into play when both the attacker and defender have armor. So we would have had to look there if the Soviets had tanks, but they didn't. We had to look here for our artillery density modifier, and this is the one that was getting halved or quartered, halved, one of the two. Down over here, we've got our combat procedure and our results. Here we have our attackers' results, and here we have our defenders' combat results. So the attacker rolls on this chart, and the defender rolls on this chart, but the attacker was elite, so he's rolling on this chart on this column, and the defender was, what the hell was the defender? Green? I think he was green. I can't remember. He's probably green. So he was rolling on this column on this chart. How many charts did we use? I don't know, 5, 6 or so charts in there for a single hasty attack, right? And what gets me is we've got how many die roll modifiers in here? And there are some of these die roll modifiers that are taking place before the die roll and some that are taking place after the die roll, I do believe. All right, let's see. Yeah, net die roll modifier. Oh, for this was for combat proficiency die roll modifiers. But we had incidences where we're having and then multiplying things. So if artillery is going to be halved, artillery is going to be halved again. And for a hasty attack, we multiply it by 25%. You can't do this without a calculator. You have to have a calculator to play this game. That's just flat out. You're going to have it. I guarantee you, I could not keep track of all the modifiers that are going to come into play for just a single attack. I'm going to have to have some way to write it down. That's why I was saying that this game could only be played if you've got it under plexiglass. You need the ability to write everything down because there's just so many moving parts that you're not going to be able to keep track of it all unless you do. And that's not even touching on the deliberate attack that is over here. And it uses a whole different thing going on because you're using more of your movement points. It costs 50% of your movement points. And even here, it's talking about how those original units continue on because they still have some of their movement points left. Because at this point, like we're carrying on from here, he declares a deliberate attack against Hex E using the 5 units in Hex D that used 5 out of 12 or 42% of their movement points, so they have enough points left. I mean, it's too dense. It's too dense. It's way too dense. And I like dense and complex. I do, but there's too many modifiers. Some of this stuff needs to be taken out or streamlined or something, because imagine doing that. Just what we got here, okay? So let's say I just attacked across the line, that the Germans or the Soviets, whoever, they're attacking across the line here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, if I don't combine the attacks, if I just try to simplify it by doing one hex at a time, we've got like 8 attacks to make. And think of all those numbers that we were just coming up with, and now do that 8 times in a row. And then flip and do it for the other turn. You're going to be burnt out. You wouldn't get through in a gaming evening just one side's turn, let alone if you got the whole game set up. All right, so to continue on, it goes into deliberate attack. We're not going to get into that, but the other stuff that we can go on. So exploit and advance. You can do a hasty attack. You can advance on. We've got an example for bridge demolition and major river assault, because you can do that stuff. So besides just the stuff that we're talking about now, you can do ground attacks. You can do close air support. You can attack certain things. You can attack airports. You can attack bridges. You can try to destroy the bridges. You can build rafts to do river assault. You can turn those rafts into pontoon bridges. And then on top of that, here we go. We're getting into some of the air examples, and this is what I was talking about with your aircraft, where you'll fly missions with them, and depending on where they fly, you're going to be zigzagging across this board. This actually isn't that bad. This part I haven't even figured out yet. I just haven't. These are subordination chits that are keeping track of things. This is explaining how combat supply is supposed to be passed down from on high down to the units down below it, right? So this 25 stockpiled is getting divided up between all of these guys. And that, I'll be honest, I haven't even tried to touch on yet. Here we've got more of our combat aircraft doing all of their different flying, keeping track of damage and fatigue levels and stressors and all that good stuff. And then here at the back, it starts getting into the hedgehogs. And I haven't even touched on hedgehogs, which the Germans have all the way across this line here, right? Those little counters represent hedgehogs. They're basically fortifications. They represent sandbags, trenches, things like. And as you improve it from hedgehog 1 to 2 to fortified hedgehog 1 and 2, it represents better and better fortifications. But like I had mentioned in another spot, you can build those fortifications, but there's so many specific rules about where you can build the fortifications and how you can build them, but it doesn't say when you can build them. It doesn't tell you like, okay, I want to build the fortification with it, but when in the turn sequence do I actually build that fortification? All right, and just okay. I was looking this up because I was going to try to show something else, but just as a FYI, okay, we're in the rule book here. We've got hasty attack and deliberate attack, right, in the rule book, and it goes into this, ground combat resolution, combat proficiency, results and implementation, and then for some reason we have major river assaults in the Soviet order number, blah, 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 blahs, converting assault rafts to pontoon bridges, advance after combat. And then over here, we finally get the combat modifiers and DRMs and how they affect things. And it's like, this should be a couple of pages back. It should be with the combat, not the assault bridge stuff should come after this. All right, so to try to show what I'm doing here, let's take a quick example. Let's see how this works. And actually, we'll pull these guys off and we'll try to make it even more simplified. We will have this group attack this group and just leave it at that, right? Just one hex to one hex and see if we can figure out the numbers. And we'll just declare this to be a hasty attack. So we've got some panzers and they are being attacked by an infantry group, infantry division here, and some AT guns, army level AT guns here. Let's see what this does. Okay, and we'll even do this here. Put these guys back where they were, and flip them over. Throw them back over there. And actually, those aren't the ones I'm going to use. We'll use these because they're close to that attack, and they have the range. So we'll give them artillery support, and we will have artillery support here as well. So, all right, so we'll give both sides artillery support. We got some here. They're in the same line formation. These guys are subjugated to it anyway. Here to here, here to here. So both are getting artillery support. Strength 4 over here. Strength 8 over here. I think that's going to be cut down, but I don't know. All right, so here's our combat procedure. Attackers declared a hasty attack. He is declared supporting artillery, close air support, no close air support. Neither side is getting leader or MI assets, MI assets being mission intelligence assets, but I'm not sure what those are supposed to represent anyway. Defender is declared his artillery. You can do counter battery fire, but we're not even going to try to do any of that. Now, had we included air into this as close air support, we would have to deal with any potential enemy fighters or flak. The air support that can be contributed depends on whether it's a hasty attack or if it's a deliberate attack. And that's like that for both sides. I think the attacker can, for a hasty, can declare 1, or maybe not at all. I think it might be just deliberate. I don't know. Again, there's so many different modifiers and if this, then that's, that it's hard to keep track of all of it. All right. Resolve attacker combat proficiency, possible RCEs, split into multiple attacks as required, resolve each attack, and we're still, it's like resolve the attack, but there's so many other little things we have to worry about that aren't listed down as part of this. And that's if it's a hasty attack, reduce it by 25%. The artillery support may or may not get reduced. Like that should be here, right? That should be on here. And for us, we're going to have the AQR ratings, right? Because both sides have an AQR rating. The Russians have a 4, the Germans have a 3, which means the Russians have the advantage. They've got a +1 for this, right? For AQRs. But we haven't even got to the combat proficiency yet, which is supposed to be first. Each point of AQRD, which is the armor quality rating differential, negates a die roll modifier from the other side. only the red DRMs above, which I'm guessing are these, like anything that's red. The AQRD may also increase armor losses for the lower side if the differential is 0 to 1, no effect. 2 to 3 must take an extra step loss. 4 plus must take 2. All right, so for us, it's going to have no effect because we've got just a 1, right? And for each point, so we've got 1 point, so I can negate one of the defender's modifiers that's red. I'm not sure exactly which ones I could negate, but hey, we'll see if we can figure this out. Let's find our combat results table here. Okay, here's our combat proficiency table. Number of attacking hexes, 1. And all of our die roll modifiers. We're green, so we're -3. All right, the attacking HQ command chain is radio comm. I don't know. 2 plus hex hasty attack, -1 for each hex greater than 1. No knight alum. All right, so these are our results. All right, so our results can go all the way from -5 up to 16. Let's roll our die here. We got a 10. 10 -3 is going to be 7, which is blue dot. Roll a d10, apply the result. So we got a blue result. So it's good for the Soviets, but it's not great. We're not getting a great modifier on that. We got an 8. What is 8 going to change? 8 is NSDAP Zeal. +1 attacker step loss. Defender must take a retreat plus route check. So all that did was give me a loss, 1 step loss, and they have to retreat and route check. See if we can remember that. All right, now let's start trying to figure out our values. We've got 9. Well, I don't even know if I'll be able to do it because I don't have a calculator nearby, so I'm going to be guessing some of these numbers. All right, we got 21 +4, but the artillery density table comes into it. Total soft SP attacking or defending. Number of hexes is just 1 for the attacker. Defender times 1. Always assess using defender's hex. Yes, obviously. Okay, they have a hedgehog. They're in a clear hex with a hedgehog. Total soft stacking points. See, I was sitting there going, is that supply points? It's stacking points. How many stacking points of soft stuff do they have in that hex? And I don't think they got any. And I'm knocking the counters around over here. How many soft stacking points do they have? None. They've got 0. Okay, so it's in a hedgehog 0 to 4. So it's going to put us here, which means the attacker and defender's artillery is going to be reduced by half. Okay, so this becomes a 2 and this becomes a 4 for our combat. And remember, I'm doing everything I can to keep these numbers small and easy for this. Now, we had 21 +2 for that, and I think that's everything that I'm adding to it. Am I getting anything else? Oh, that's right. I've got to multiply it by 0.75 because it's a hasty attack. Defender artillery without combat supply, no. Defending units without combat, no. That's not gonna. They're not out of supply. Now the Germans will be out of supply on the next turn, but that doesn't kick in yet. I don't think it's ever precipitation. We're just going to say it's clear because I didn't even do the weather yet. It's not dark. It's not night. ISO is isolated, Doesn't count, not routed. Okay, here we go. Same air sector or under 15 hex range, close air support ×2, or ground attack. This is that thing I was talking about where you have to count 15 hexes. But I don't know how to count the 15 hexes because it's in air sectors, not hexes. Adjacent air sector. We're not having any air power, so that doesn't matter. No one's suppressed. It's not a 3 hex attack. It's not a 4 hex. Not multiple defending formations. Regimental integrity. I don't know. Yes, there is that regimental integrity thing. Both of them should be getting the regimental integrity because they both have adjacent units that are regimentally adjacent. So the Germans get 50% more, I believe. Yes, they get 50% more added, and the Soviets are going to get 25% added. So that's going to bump the Soviets up. Well, let's see, roughly about 5. Yeah, 5. So we'll say it's 26 plus 2 for the artillery is 28. The Germans are getting 50% added. So adding 3, so that's a 9. 9 plus 12 or plus 4 is 13. And I already forgot what number I had over here. It's 30-ish, I think, is where we're at. Oh, wait, I still got to reduce them by 75% first. When here's the thing. What happens first? Do I reduce them by 75% or do I add the 50% for regimental integrity? Don't know because it's not marked down, and I don't know if the order in which it's written down means that's the order to do it. All right, but let's try to remember all of this. Okay, artillery is getting reduced by half because of crap. They're getting regimental integrity. We're getting to remove a die roll modifier, even though I don't think they got any other red die roll modifiers. Nope, they're getting a +1. Well, they're getting some because they have armor, but I think it's negated by the AQR over here, so we're just going to ignore that one. Okay, if we've got 21 times 0.75%, that means I got to reduce a quarter off of it. So that brings them down to what? We'll say 16 roughly. And then they get 25% of that added. So that bumps them back up to 20. So 20 plus the 2 that they're going to get there. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something in one of the other modifiers. They are veteran elite troops defending against green troops. So there's going to be a negative die roll modifier over here. The Germans get the 3 added plus the 4, so the 13 with a -1 die roll modifier. So I believe it's 22 against 13, 22 over 13. So not even 2 to 1 with a negative die roll modifier, I believe. I think that there's another die roll modifier that's going to come into play. All right, we are not 2 to 1, but we're probably over here in this 1 to 1 for the Russians. So we roll here, and we're going to be looking on this green line. The Germans are going to be rolling here under the veteran line. And is it still a -1? I believe so. -1? Yeah. I believe both of those rolls get a -1. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they both get it. So that's what we're going to do. Soviets get a 9, reduced by 1. That's going to put us at our combat odds here. Looking at green. So that's going to drop it down to an 8. An 8 over here at the 1.5 means a retreat. We already got the retreat from the random combat event. So they're going to just have what they were going to have anyway, which was a retreat. And I take a step loss. The Soviets take a step loss. There's going to be a retreat and a route check for the Germans. Now the Germans are going to roll against the Soviets with a -1. -1, -1 on our veteran table. So they're going to be at 0. And they are 0.5 to 1. I believe. No, where am I at? I am right here. 2. They inflict 2 losses and they must retreat with the little star icon that I don't remember what the hell it means. Attacker must take first step loss from a unit that generated a die roll. So they got to take a die roll modifier thing. Yes. Is that right? Yeah. The damage done to them is 2 steps and a retreat. So the Soviets would lose 2 steps of units. So they would get reduced. We could reduce the other. What a bad attack. They did not get a good roll there. Did I flip that one over? Yeah, there it is. Just flip these guys over here. And they got to retreat. A couple of hexes. The thing retreat just by 1. We'll throw them there. The Germans have to retreat as well. But a retreat can be eaten by the hedgehog, and a step loss can be eaten by the hedgehog. So they're not going to have to retreat, but they are going to have to take a route check. And where's the route check modifier here? All right, so the Germans have to take a route check. I'm not sure what the national morale is for the Germans. It does not say here on the chart, unless I'm missing it somewhere. But I do not see it. It explains the routes. They've got a -2 modifier for it. But, oh, here we go. Finally, it's at the bottom. The Germans have a level of 8. So we just need an 8 or less. And with a -2, we would get that with anything. So they are good. They're not going to retreat. They're not going to rout. So we don't have to worry about it. I believe that is the completion of that combat. Right? I think so. But I'm pretty sure I messed something up in there. And I'm almost damn sure that I messed something up in there. And I tried to keep it very, very, very basic. Now, multiply that level of confusion by adding in supply, communication, air power, and more units. Once you've done all of that, I mean, when the hexes get multi-hexes, when you start figuring for deliberate attacks, there's too much. Complex and Chromie is one thing, but this is just, you're flipping back and forth through the charts. You're trying to remember this, like, okay, hasty gets reduced by 25%, but I'm getting that regimental integrity thing, so I'm getting 25% more, but the numbers don't work out the same, because if I reduce it by 25% and then I increase that number by 25%, it's going to be different than the original number. So you can't just call it a wash. And then you've got the artillery that if it's this many steps or soft steps, it's going to get reduced or not. And it's just too much there that gets so unwieldy, and especially as these numbers start to go up. I was trying to keep the numbers small. Imagine like that example where it's got the 90 some odd this multiplied by 0.75. You saw that was one of the last things that he did in the example, but that means he's doing some of those other modifiers, the regimental bonus integrity thing during it, even though in the example in the chart, the hasty reduction is listed first. But in his example of play, the hasty reduction is done last. And that can make a big difference. Here, it was only a difference of about a point. But if you're doing it with a much larger attack with much bigger numbers, you're talking about there could be a big swing there in the amount of points that are getting added or removed or adjusted. And okay, and I know this has been just a long video, but the game's too big to not take my time with and not show you guys like everything. And I know this has probably been a little more confusing than my usual reviews where I'm more succinct and focused on just, hey, this is what da 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 da. But this is what I've experienced, and I'm trying to translate that into a video so you guys can understand this. We're gonna pop up. We're gonna do some final thoughts about the game, but I'll go ahead and say it while I've got it here. I think that there is something here. I'll talk about it in the final thoughts. The skeletal structure, the components themselves are great. The map looks good. You get all the counters spread across. You just a real wargamer just would be dying to get their hands on some dice to start playing this thing because it looks gorgeous when you just have the whole thing spread out and you're ready to dive into that. The problem is there's just too much there in the way. And if this had been developed, right, and streamlined a lot of that confusion, got rid of those abbreviations or put in a glossary, made it to where the game was much easier to understand and just cut down on some of that chrome, got you into the gameplay, you could really get into it. There's something here that people will like, but you've got to cut away the fat first. There's just too much. This thing can't be just developed at cons. It really needs to be handled differently. So such a beautiful game can be enjoyed by more people, because right now it's only going to appeal to a very tiny subset of war gamers, because most are not going to want to endure the pain that is required to really get this to the table and play it. There's just too much in the way right now. That's got to be cut out so it's a more streamlined experience. It can still be deep, it can still be complex, but it needs to make sense and be understandable. All right, let's go do some final thoughts. All right, so we're back. We're back. I know that took a little bit. I know that it probably wasn't as pleasant as it could have been, but it needed to be said. The ultimate thing for this game is it's really going to go towards just a very select group of people who would be interested in something like this. This is not going to be a GMT game or a Compass game that any wargamer is just going to pick up and have fun with. And it's because those games are the Walmart, the Costco of wargaming. It's not bad. I'm not hating on them for it, but they're chugging along. They're producing a product that everyone's going to like, right? This one is not that. This is the guy who's making his own thing, trying his own way. And because of that, his product's going to have a very specific taste, and it's only going to appeal to a very select group of people. And the problem is, like I spoke with Kev about this because he's been doing a lot of videos on this, is that it's been crafted, it's been worked on and discussed at cons. But I think the biggest problem is that prior to production, he didn't take and either give this to someone like myself or someone else. Any professional war game reviewer would be one, but I even think that we weren't really the people who needed to see this. I think it needed to really be a novice, because I think a complete novice would be able to better articulate, because I'm sure there's other things that I've missed just because I have experience. And that's because I've always held the mindset that any war game, no matter how complex, should have the ability that anyone who wants to get into wargaming can pick that game up and play it, right? Once they read the rules, they can understand the rules, set the game up and play it. Now, they might not be the best. They might have to reference the rules a lot. They might not understand the concepts right off the bat. That's fine. There's certain things like zones of control that wargamers just naturally understand. We've had so much experience with it that it just rings true to us. Combat results tables, we'll get those. We've had plenty of them. So stuff like that doesn't need to be explained to us. It does need to be explained, though. And that's really what's missing here, is that complete novice, that complete noob view at it, right? Let someone see it who has no back end knowledge and see if they could play it. And sadly enough, they could not play this game. This game could only be played by a wargamer who has experience enough to intuit what is trying to be said, because too much of it is left unsaid. And that was one of the biggest things I talked about in the components. He shorthands a lot of it. And that's fine. I mean, wargamers, we're military. We understand everything gets abbreviated. Cool. No problem. Put a glossary in there. That glossary is sorely needed because there is no one-stop shopping to figure out what this term is supposed to mean. I gave the example in our interview, and not our interview, our show. And during the thing, when I was reading the rule book, the term MI was used. And I've been through this rule book. It may be in there, but I doubt it. I never saw MI in there. It was in one of the charts. MI is explained, it's mission intelligence, but it's never spelled out in the rule booklet. And SB, a supply battalion, is only fully spelled out that I could find once. And it wasn't spelled out at the beginning of supply. And that's one of the things, like supply in the rule book, the supply being explained, it's kind of split up in two different sections. Kev talked about this in one of his reviews. When it comes to hedgehogs, those fortifications and the multitudes of different levels, when you create hedgehogs, it does not say when hedgehogs are being actually put onto the board. There's just so much that does not get fully explained. When it comes to air power in this game, I couldn't tell you how to do it. I went over this in the explanation. I don't get it. I don't understand the air sectors at all. I don't understand how you're supposed to be counting hexes. I'm sure there's some type of a system involved with it, but I don't know what it is. And it's not really explained in there. At least it's not explained in a way that's understandable enough that a guy with a decade of experience can understand it. And I get it. I try to be a little softer when it comes to rule books in my critique, because I do have memory issues, and I'm like a goldfish. Sometimes information just doesn't retain, and that's not the publisher's fault. So I don't fault them if I can't retain all the information. That's on me. But this isn't a retaining information thing. I was simply trying to figure out where the airports were, right? I could see numbers listed down on the sheet, on the little map area showing airports are here, but it's like 1 through 12, 1 through 17, however many different airports were there. But the airports themselves aren't numbered on the sheet. And they've got this little location designation like C4N. And I remember, I think it was on the Russian one. It might have been the German. I forget which one. But one of the airports, its location is like CSN or C4N, whatever it was. But the map sectors started at D. There was no C on there. And I'm like, where are you getting C? And I'm sure there's some explanation. And I didn't ask, and I shouldn't have to ask. And that bothered me because I had to keep going to Kev to understand certain things. When it came to setup, I didn't know what the hell it meant, because it listed down the formations that were there. But those formations had, -1Y, -2 blue, or 2B, and that meant colors. Okay, great, but it's never spelled out anywhere. And you have to basically intuit that means colors. A simple little annotation at the bottom, Y equals yellow, B equals blue, R equals red, something, somewhere, so people could understand that. And that's just missing stuff, right? But there's other stuff that's located in areas like the fortifications, that part of it is referenced in the charts, and it says refer to the charts. Well, put it in the rule book. Everything needs to be in the rule book. right? Except for the chart itself. The chart doesn't need to be in the rulebook, but the explanation needs to be in the rulebook. I should be able to read that rulebook, put it down when I'm done, and play the game using nothing but the player aids after. I shouldn't need the rulebook from then on out. And this game is just not like that. And even the example of play was this word salad, just word salad of a beating, explaining it all out. And the combat itself is so complex. And I don't mind complex combat, but it's got to have some type of flow to it. There's so many charts. You've got your combat proficiency, you've got your weather you got to worry about, you got the air power, you got artillery. There can be random events. There can be random events that you have more than one, and then someone's getting to choose. Then you have blue events, and then you have red events, and then you've got the attackers chart, you've got the defenders chart, and it makes it to where combat is such a slog. You've got such big numbers. And then on top of that, there's this order in which you're having to do things, but it's not exactly spelled out exactly when you're doing it. So depending on how you do this math, you can come up with some really different numbers because there's different levels of multiplication. Like, okay, in this situation, the unit's only going to have 75% of its firepower. Okay, it loses a quarter. Okay. But hey, here, if you're attacking with armor and they don't have armor or anti-tank guns, then you get to double. But if they've got under 6 steps, then it gets reduced by half. And then if this, there's a lot of that like multiplication where you're reducing or increasing the numbers. And anyone who's taken a math course can understand that depending on how you do that math, if you do it like math is laid out, right? You do like your was it division first and then multiplication, or I forget which, but depending on how you situate those numbers, you could come up with a wildly different number. And these are supposed to be given your combat ratios. And then you have to do this for every single combat. And then even some combats can be broken up into multiple combats depending on those random events that can happen. This game, for its size, with and I just showed you guys a small one, right? If you set up the big one, big scenario with it would look, oh my God, it would be beautiful. I really like the look of the game. Really like the look of the game. All the counters spread out. Oh, it would be a thing of beauty, sight to behold, no doubt. But to play through all those different combat actions would take you hours of computations, of hardcore math to figure out the numbers. Because think about it, if you've got now there's 6 maps, you're not going to use all maps depending on what campaign scenario you'll say. So you're using 4 to 5 maps worth of space, roughly, right? Different areas that are being fought over, but big game, big monster game, okay? But imagine you've got this just wall of units, top to bottom, and now you've got to do all these different declared attacks, and then you've got to do hasty attacks. And then you're going to do your deliberate attacks. And, hasty gets this, and deliberate gets that. And then you've got to keep track of all the different air power units that you got. Now that's fine. That's a monster game. You're going to have that in there. But with how complex and how hard it is and how many moving parts you have when it comes to doing the math for the combat actions themselves, you could spend hours just getting one side's one turn done. And then you'd have to do the other side, right? So you do like the 04 to 08 turn. It could take you hours, just depending on the number of units, just to get the Germans done. And then you got to do the Russians. And you're going to be like beat down after doing all that complex figuring out to figure out this modifier, that modifier. And even still, just to mention this, there are some modifiers that don't even need to be there. There's an air modifier, and it has to do with the supply level of the German units, the Russian air units. And For both factions, it's each getting a -2. They both get -2. So it really doesn't matter because all of the aircraft are going to get that same modifier. And I'm like, okay, I get it. This is probably to correlate with the campaign game that's coming later. Cool, great. That's understandable. But instead of having that modifier here, just adjust the charts and remove that modifier completely, and then you put it in the campaign segment later as a single modifier that comes into play, rather than having it here when it's simply not needed because you're never going to use it. You're just going to have a straight -2 across the board, and it's just one extra thing to keep track of. Why? If everyone gets the -2, then it's not really a -2. You're just reducing your combat results table by 2 for every single action. So just reduce the combat results table by 2 and have that be the combat results table. I don't want to spend all my time hating on the game because it's not horrible, right? We're not talking about like the worst thing that's ever been put to print or anything like that. It's not that. There is a game here that I do think people will like. I'm talking about the people who play games like War in the East 2, the video game, right? Or Shadow Empire. I recently got into that, really been digging that one. Those games that are deep, the Ultimate Admiral, Battle for the Pacific, right? Someone who would look at that game and say, I want to play that, and they'd really take the time to try to set it up and do it, right? Someone who wants to play campaign for North Africa and really give it a shot for those the pasta points, water for your pasta points. People like that will find something here. And I'm fairly confident that this rulebook's going to be tweaked. It has no choice but to be corrected and to be updated. This is probably a case of hang back a little bit. Wait. Let some more kinks be ironed out, and then come back around, right? Maybe later when the campaign system's more fleshed out, there's some more games in the system, and these bugs are eliminated, and it's a lot smoother, then we'll be there. This game it sadly needs a developer. It needs that loving touch to take it from what it is to greatness. And that's what bothers me. And I've given this example in our show the other day, but to me, this is a classic car that is in a garage, in grandma's garage, and it's been left there for 30 years. It's covered in dust, tires are rotted, battery's dead, right? But you get that right person in there, you clean the dust off of it, you get her spruced up, you're going to have a very fine piece of equipment there in front of you. This can be that. It's got the skeletal structure for greatness. It does. There is good in here. There's good in Darth Vader. There is. But Luke Skywalker has not got here yet, right? He has not flipped his father from the dark side. We're just not there yet. I think this one, it got taken out of the oven too early. And it's sad. It breaks my heart because, God, I want to love this game. I want to love this game. I love big games. I'm not a big Eastern Front guy. I'm not. I'll play Eastern Front games. I like the Western. Pacific is my jam. I've always loved the Pacific. But still, there is greatness here. There is good here. Components, like I said, are really, really nice. The counters pop out easy enough that they're not, you don't have to clip them. If you don't want to, you can, right? And I clip mine. I think it always just makes them look that much neater. But you don't have to. They weren't that jagged. They punched out nice and easily. And with the amount of counters we're talking about, I understand doing the die cut because that's going to be a big savings cost versus the pre-grounded ones. So I don't fault them on that. And wargamers are fine clipping their counters. But this one laid out on a big table with all those stacks of counters, all warring, that's a thing of beauty for a lot of wargamers, just to see the massive scale. All right, that's why I've got World at War 85 still on my table, and I'm still working on that one, just because it's so big and beautiful, and you just love seeing all the counters there. This game brings that, but you are going to, if you get it now, get it with your eyes open. Get it knowing that everything isn't spelled out. You're going to have to go online. You're going to have to ask questions. The biggest problem for me probably right now is probably the air power and the supply system. I think those are just so janky. They're very hard to understand. The combat system itself isn't bad per se. It just has too many moving parts. I like complex, but there's just too much. There's just too much here. When you can have more than 4 charts you're rolling on for a single combat action, you're getting kind of hefty. You're getting kind of hefty with that. But like I said, I think that there are people out there that will like this, right? Who are into the bigger, the complex, the those real deep games, real chromy games. You'll find something that you like here, but God, you're gonna have to work at it, right? This is a coconut, and all you've got is a rusted spoon to get to it. If you can get in there, you'll find something tasty, but you're gonna have to work at it. I know this doesn't explain everything, and God, I hate it. I really wanted to give this like the most positive review, but I'm not being honest if I don't. And I can't let the fact that I like the designer, I mean, I think he's a great guy, I can't let that affect my review of it. And I feel bad for having to say this the way that I am. It can be. It can be. It's just not yet. Wait for now, unless you're a glutton for punishment. If you're a sadist, jump on in. You'll love it. It'll be right up your butt. All right, that's gonna be it for me. I hope you guys learned something, pick something up from this. Enjoyed the video. This is probably my least favorite video that I've made in a while. I do not like having to say all this, but it needs to be said. All right, you guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.